Hello, everyone. How are you guys doing tonight? I hope everybody had a good weekend. I know that I did. Hey, Miranda, how are you? Hey, Tech Death, how are you? Hey, Lynn, so good to see you. Hey, Lipsha, good to see you. Hey, John, how you guys doing? Good to have you guys here. So it was a long weekend for me. Hey, Melodramatic Monday. Good to see you. Thanks for being here. I went on a it was a family reunion that we haven't had all of our um it was a sibling um extended, so all the spouses, their kids, um the cousins. It was about 25 of us, I think, in total. And we basically rented out a hotel, a really nice one, and we all stayed in it and did some fun stuff and just hung around and had some really nice meals and got to see one another. We haven't all been together on the same continent since 2014, I think it was. So it was longer than we usually do, but because of the pandemic, that kind of put a little damper on things for us. I can't express enough how getting away just at a hotel is so relaxing, because I was expecting it to be a lot more anxiety for me than it turned out to be. I actually had a really nice, relaxing time. So I was happy to get back home, though. I think everybody always is. Hey, Jennifer. How are you? Good to have you here. So everybody that's in the chat, if you are not aware, I currently do have memberships to my channel. They start out at $1.99 a month and go on up, and the perks are listed on my membership page of my channel. So all you have to do is go to the homepage of the channel and you'll see the membership tab. And click there and you can find out everything that you need. Nightbot is always good at giving you guys information. So anybody that is interested in that, please feel free to join. I will be putting out some members only content very soon. As my members grow, the content will get even more in depth. I'm working on some things right now in trying to get a couple of people to do some interviews, to come on the show and be interviewed, and we're working on that. And some people are really busy, as as we all are. So I'm working on that, and some of that will be membership members only. So anyway, just feel free if you would like that. You can also support my channel through PayPal or through the super chat feature as well, that's listed. And I appreciate everyone who has done that. I can't say enough about the people who do support me. My subscribers are amazing. This chat is amazing that we have. I love the fact that we have such a quiet group. We can come in here and discuss things and give differences in opinions and still respect each other at the end of the day. That's so important to me. I'm going to say something about some of the drama that's been going on around the Delphi community in the last week. And all I'm going to say about it is this. True Crime Maria is a friend of mine. She is also a moderator of mine. I have seen the things that she has put out there about another content creator. So I know that what she's saying is truthful. She does not want any more of this really talked about, It's very personal. It's very painful what she's been put through. And with that being said, I do not want it in the chat. So people coming in, please refrain from talking about it because we do not want that here. I really try to stay out of that and make sure that our channel remains open to everyone so they don't have to come here and spend their time listening to people. Hey, Maria, good to see you. So glad to have you with us tonight. People don't want to come and listen to other people fight, and they certainly don't want to come and listen to other people's dirty laundry. So that's just how I feel about it. I know Maria feels the same way, and we'll just move on. So tonight, the channel, I was trying to decide, everybody wants to hear about Delphi all the time. And I get that. And I know that when I do a Delphi show, I get 100 viewers, live viewers. So it's great. But I also know that these other cases need just as much exposure as our Delphi case does. So tonight, I thought we would concentrate on Evansdale a little bit because tomorrow is the 10th anniversary of Elizabeth and Lyric being abducted and murdered in Evansdale, Iowa. And all I can say to you guys is this case is so heartbreaking for so many reasons. Whenever children are abducted and murdered, it just absolutely pulls at my heartstrings. Hey, Digital, so good to see you. So good to have you with us. I always like to have Digital in the house. So I thought one of the things that we would talk about first, before we actually talk about Elizabeth and Lyric, I thought we would go over what it does to families, or what kind of a toll it takes on families when they have an unsolved murder in their family of one of their loved ones. Hey, Carol Durant, good to see you. Thank you so much for coming. Oh, Jennifer, no way. You rock, honey. No way. Hey, Tamara. Hey, Tamara. Thank you so much for coming. Always good to have you here. Some of what I found was just mind-boggling to me, but the numbers are staggering and they don't lie. So in the United States, there has been more than 300,000 homicides across the United States that have gone unsolved since 1960. Stop and think about that for a minute. 300,000 people were murdered and nobody knows who did it. I mean, that to me is just appalling. But I also think it says a lot about different things in our society. And we're going to talk about that a little bit tonight. But when these homicides do not get solved, it not only affects the families, but it also affects the communities that the families live in. The communities are traumatized, the families are traumatized, and they're left struggling trying to find justice and to make sense of what happened. And then the realization comes that justice might never come. And I hope, upon hope, that that's not something that we're looking at with Evansdale or with Delphi for that matter. One of the things that the research that I found states that Black Americans living in underserved areas are impacted in greater numbers than other populations. So that's something to look at as well. But families can be torn apart and communities ravaged by unsolved murders. And anytime you have unsolved murders in a community, that's going to tell you that murderers are walking around in your community, which is frightening. It also tells you that communities and families don't have so-called closure. Now, I'm going to go out on a limb and say that just because you get an arrest and a conviction and the case is solved doesn't mean the family ever has closure. But it does put that chapter to bed. I think we use that word wrongly when talking about the death of family members, when it's regarding violence, or actually anyway, but most definitely violent crime, because to lose a family member that way is just devastating, and you never get over it. It's not something that you get over. It's something that you learn to live with. That loss is something that you have to integrate into your life. Some people are able to do that, and other people aren't. Other people get stuck, and they're just treading water, so to speak. It just complicates the whole grieving process, and it often precipitates a longer detrimental effect on those that are left behind. And it just makes, like I said, it just tears families completely apart. Loss is bad enough, but traumatic loss is terrible. And if you've never experienced it, you don't understand it. We can all try to empathize with these victims. Hey, Just Pam, how are you? It's so good to see you. Sorry, everything's moving so fast. Email me, Pam, and I'll let you know. Hey, Jacqueline. Welcome, welcome. Everyone, welcome Jacqueline. She's a new member. Very good to see you. I think what happens with traumatic loss when our loved ones are murdered, you don't ever get to say goodbye. You have that, it's just gone. They're just gone. 1 minute they were there and 1 minute they weren't. And it's hard for people to move on past the loss process because the murders are not solved. So it's like an open wound, and it can't close or fester over with a scab because the murder's left unsolved. And the type of anxiety and ambiguity of these types of losses can manifest themselves in extreme anxiety along with physical and mental symptoms similar to post-traumatic stress disorder. There can be eating and digestive issues, difficulty sleeping, frequent crying and outbursts of tears for no apparent reason. Heart palpitations can happen, and flashbacks that leave one dwelling on the murder or the past. And the health impacts of these families are similar regardless of how the family member was murdered or the race of the people impacted. But children are also exposed to the adversities and trauma of unsolved murders, especially when it's their siblings or their parents. These children's brains are still forming, and they can develop ongoing stress known as toxic stress. And this can lead to health problems and developmental problems as they age. Um, there was a study done at Drexel University where they studied children of who had their siblings or their parents murdered, and it was significant in the developmental problems that these children suffered. Um, some people find it difficult to just get back into a regular routine, whether it be sleeping, eating, or even just getting out of bed to get ready and go to work. A lot of times you don't have the energy or the strength to do those things. The longer the crime goes unsolved, the worse it can be for some of these families. They become sick, physically ill more often because their immune systems are constantly being pulled at because of the lack of sleep, the lack of good nutrition, not eating properly, not exercising, a lot of the things that you need to be doing. So those are some of the um, things that can happen. It's just a sad thing to think about that we've had 300,000 unsolved murders since 1960 in this country. Um, and when we fail to solve homicide cases, it violates our fundamental sense of trust that we have in our justice system and the fairness within our communities and our criminal justice system. Um, and especially if it looks like one group of individuals' cases are solved more often than another group. Um, there is a advocacy group in Colorado called Families of Homicide Victims and Missing Persons, and they empathize with all families seeking justice for unsolved murder. It was formed in 2001 by victims' families who believed the police were not doing enough to resolve their loved ones' cases. Oftentimes, when these cases go unsolved, grief begins to turn to anger and then rage and helplessness. And as time goes on and nothing happens, disappointment in our system and how it functions, the lack of justice in the very people who we depend on to help us, it just grows and gets bigger. And you can kind of imagine that, you want to believe in law enforcement. You want to trust in law enforcement that they have as much of a vested interest in your child's case or your loved one's case as the next one. Because we've all been led to believe from the time we were yay high that the police officers were on our side and they're there to help us. And there's a man in Boulder, Colorado named Sid Wells. He sought justice for his younger brother's murder, and it was unsolved for 35 years. His brother was murdered in Boulder, Colorado. And on August 1st, 1983. And the case was large. It made headlines because he was a 22-year-old journalism student, and he was dating the daughter of actor Robert Redford. A suspect, Sid's roommate, was arrested, released, and then disappeared. And the arrest affidavit indicated that cocaine might have been a factor in the killing. The murder went into a cold case file until 2010, when a new prosecutor revived it and filed a first-degree murder warrant for the same suspect's arrest. And Rob Wells said the murder turned his family's lives upside down. His father had been killed 2 years earlier in a car accident involving a drunk driver, and his mother, who suffered from cancer, spent the years before she died working to keep her son's unsolved murder case alive. Weeks after the murder, a still traumatized Sam was behind the wheel of his car when a drunk driver plowed into it, and he sustained a serious brain injury and was diagnosed with PTSD. Sam says he freaked out at the moment that because he was the one who discovered his brother's body, and it caused him to go into a severe depression. And he tried to go to counseling, but it didn't work for him. And he also tried to finish college and get a stable job, but that didn't work for him either. He said he tried to stop thinking about it, but it just pops into his head. He said, and that was 3 decades ago, 30 years ago. He now lives alone in a camper in Meade, Colorado, which he said he purchased for him by his brother Rob. He said his brother helps him out a lot. And Rob Wells, when discussing his brother, he breaks down in tears over the whole ordeal whenever he's talked about it. Depression is a challenge at times, and he says his health has been an issue, and if this had not happened, the majority of his daily life would not be consumed with the horrors that people inflict on one another, and I would not be crying as much as I do. And Rob Wells said from interacting with families that regardless of race, ethnicity, or neighborhoods, the loved ones of unsolved murder victims are not dealt with in an effective way. They're not being given all the information. They don't know what's going on most of the time. Police might not have any logical leads, but they might not have any logical leads, but they'll never tell you. Sam says he vouches for that because every year since his son was killed, Hawkins has called the Denver police on his son's birthday on the anniversary of the death and 1 or 2 other times. And he says, I tell them I'm calling about my son's case, and it's been X amount of time since he was killed, and I would appreciate a callback as a courtesy. He knows they're busy, so he always makes a point of asking them to call back as a courtesy, even if they don't have any new information. Most of the time, they never call back. Joe Montoya, who is a division chief of investigations for the Denver Police Department, said that while homicide detectives really care about the families, there probably won't be constant contact, especially if there's just nothing to move on in terms of case developments. It's probably not a bad idea to have someone in general to reach out to the families on occasion, just to let them know we haven't forgotten about them. Really, Mr. Montoya, you think so? I mean, come on, put yourself in the position of these loved ones who have murdered family members. Do you think you would want to have a phone call on occasion just to check in and know that you care about them and that you're still, working to work their cases? We have a cold case crisis in this country right now, and it's really bad in Indiana. And it's not any much better in Iowa. Across the country, so many unsolved murders are accumulating from wealthy Palm Beach County in California to modest Ovid, New York, and places in between that some experts have expressed alarm. Despite fewer homicides nationwide in recent decades, police are having less success in maintaining clearance rates for homicides. And that's from the Department of Justice's Bureau of Justice Assistance. Every criminal homicide impacts surviving family members and untold numbers of friends. In other words, potentially millions of people have been left to cope with this endless uncertainty of who took their loved ones' lives and why. I think we need to remember this when people are being so critical of how families are reacting to open cases that have not been cleared. We have no idea what those family members are going through or what they're feeling, and we need to be more empathetic with that. A former coroner named Jim Adcock and founder of the Mid-South Cold Case Initiative in Memphis believes that we are in a cold case crisis. And if we don't address it, the issue is just going to get worse. The cost of doing nothing is getting higher, and the hole we're getting into is deeper and deeper. The national clearance rate for homicides in 2017 was 61.6%, according to the FBI, down from 90% in the 1960s. Now stop and think about that for a while. In 2017, our clearance rate nationwide for homicides is 61.6%. Yet in the 1960s, when we had no technology, no computers, no cell phones, none of the things that we have at our fingertips today, they were clearing murders at 90%. Sometimes old-fashioned police work works really well, you know? The clearance rate is FBI terminology for the percentage of cases that end with an arrest or by exceptional means, such as an identified offender has died or was not charged. Denver's overall clearance rate of 64.4% in 2017 means that more than a third of homicides are going unsolved. And leaving 30% of homicides unsolved is completely unacceptable, Adcock said. We need to make solving homicides a national and a local priority. It's just unbelievable. Hey, Michelle, good to see you. Hey, CLH, good to have you here. In neighborhoods analyzed by the Washington Post in the nation's 50 largest cities, the numbers were equally dismal. About half of the more than 50,000 homicides in the analysis were unsolved, and nearly 3/4 of those victims were Black. Charles Welford, a PhD at the University of Maryland, he's a criminologist who for decades studied homicide clearance rates, said research has not found a link between the race of a victim or offender and the amount of attention given a homicide case by law enforcement. And the reality is that many of the homicides that cluster in certain communities involve gang violence, drive-by shootings, stranger-on-stranger killings, and these cases are the most difficult to clear. Hey, Victoria, good to have you here. Boy, Pam, aren't you right there? The problem in our society, people are just numb anymore. If it doesn't happen to them, they'd rather watch the Kardashians. And how sad is that? So many experts obviously agree that making an arrest can prevent a killer from committing additional homicides, and that failing to do so perpetuates the cycle of violence. Families blame apathetic police departments for failing to solve murders. Wells believes police prioritize cases based on the ease with which they think they can get a conviction. And we all know that. We know that's what they do, because prosecutors refuse to prosecute unless they have a pretty good slam dunk case. Police also point to inadequate resources to conduct investigations and the reluctance of potential witnesses to help identify suspects, among the reasons for low homicide clearance rates. Police are trying to make better community relations across the country, especially in areas where relationships are tougher between the police and the residents. The trust factor is huge. Trust is what's going to solve these cases, Montoya said. But Welford said no, there's more to this story. When it comes to improving homicide investigations, we often talk about the importance of external factors like witness cooperation as being key. But internal police practices are also critical. One of the key messages from the research is that if a police agency wants to prioritize clearing homicides, it needs to look internally, not externally. Welford said during a 2017 presentation at a conference on homicide investigation, in other words, the things that police do, how they conduct the investigation, the steps they took during the process, the quality of their homicide units. These things can account for the differences between agencies that close cases and agencies that do not. So, Fard is reluctant to blame police or any other single entity for solving so few murders in his Five Points community. Yes, there's a historic mistrust of police, but it's not just the police. It's more about the larger system being set up to fail particular people, communities, and area codes. This is a societal failure that can only be remedied by everyone working together. If communities were gardens, you can expect the area that is watered to flourish. The area without resources is left to its own survival. And Deborah Prothouse Stith, she's a medical doctor and dean of the Charles R. Drew University College of Medicine in Los Angeles, said unsolved murders represent system failures up and down the line. What unsolved murders indicate is that your government, your police force, your community, your society, and supporters in a time of tragedy are not able to step up to the plate. If you add to that communities of color and urban poor and rural poor and disregarded communities that already don't experience the full attention, support, and resources of the government and of the police, it just feels overwhelming and it makes people angry. Unsolved murders can tear families apart, as we have already stated, especially if endless trauma and grief lead to job losses, drug use, and other problems. A lot of times people will turn to drugs or alcohol to help them through the enormous grief felt by the loss of their loved ones. You also have divorce. You don't just have physical illness. You have economic impacts, and all of these things impact the health of the surviving family members. Since 2010, the CBI's Colorado Bureau of Investigation's cold case review team has helped local police resolve just 5 previously unsolved homicide cases. 5 since 2010. The Bureau, which intervenes in cold cases only when requested by local police, also helped create new leads in several other cases, according to CBI Investigates. While CBI has forensics and other tools to help provide critical support in clearing old murder cases, it lacks the funding for cold case investigators. And here we go. It all comes back to the money. We do what we can to squeeze these cold cases in with the limited resources that we have. Since the cold case review team of investigators, forensic pathologists, and other experts is strictly voluntary, it meets only 2 to 4 times a year. So you can see right there, 2 to 4 times a year, that's not going to be a lot of help in solving cold cases, I don't think. CBI Director John Camper said the Bureau could accomplish a lot more with paid investigators, especially in rural areas where police may lack investigative resources. So let's talk about Evansdale. Let's talk about Delphi. These are the types of places he's talking about. So far, requests for funding have been rejected by the state legislature, he said, adding that we're going to keep at it. And I believe that that's probably most of the problem across the country, trying to get the funding that they need to investigate these cold cases. Hey, Dee, how are you? Welcome, welcome. The Bureau is aware that families and loved ones of victims feel anger, disappointment, and frustration. Anger that someone could have killed their loved one, disappointment in the process, and investigation and frustration that the pieces just aren't falling together as they should. In particular, that cold cases continue to rise even as efforts are made to reduce those numbers. While families of unsolved murder victims try to remain hopeful, reality is sobering. The longer cases drag on, the less likely it is to be solved. As new cases of homicide occur, the older ones tend to get pushed down in terms of priority for police action and prosecutorial interest. Still, time can work for investigators. Hey, Gonzo, how are you? He's swinging into the show to show love and support. Can't stay long, but hoping you are all having a great night. Thank you, Gonzo. So good to see you. I hope you're having a good evening. Stay safe out there. Thanks for being here. So time can work for investigators. New technologies can make old evidence useful. Fresh eyes on an old case can uncover new leads. Or changes in relationships between perpetrators and witnesses can mean witnesses will decide to talk. So that's another thing that can happen over time, is those relationships can change. There have been some spectacular successes in solving cold cases. Hawkins has taken comfort in hearing of recent cold case arrests across the United States. When I hear other cases being solved after some period of time, it definitely gives me hope for my own son's case. His hope was revived recently when a new cold case detective in Denver notified him that evidence had turned up in his son's case and was under review. It was a shock. They had never disclosed anything about crime scene evidence before. Even if it leads to nothing, or even if it leads to something or someone, it's not going to bring my son back. But it is important to hold someone accountable. 13 years is a long time. So the toll of unsolved murders on families is extremely devastating, basically. I mean, that's the way I look at it. And Lyric's family and Elizabeth's family are no different. Tomorrow's the anniversary of their passing, and their murder. And it's hard to imagine that it's been 10 years because I so remember when this all happened. Hey, Unsolved Crime, how are you? Good to see you, my dear. Thank you for being here. Investigators are still searching for answers in Evansdale, and they say that this is not a cold case. They are still getting tips on this case. So what happened? On July 13th, 2012, cousins Elizabeth Collins, age 8, and Lyric Cook Morrissey, age 10, were abducted while riding their bikes in Evansdale, Indiana, in Black Hawk County. Their bodies were found 7 months later by hunters in rural Bremer County, about 25 miles away. Hey, Jennifer. Shout out. Jennifer has been a member of Behind the Crime Door for 3 months. Thank you so much, you guys. Same to you, Michelle. Michelle has also been a member of Behind the Crime Door for 3 months. Thank you so much, you guys, for all of your love and support. So much appreciated. So their bodies were found 7 months later, or 5 months later, I thought it was, by hunters in rural Bremer County, about 25 miles away. The killings got national attention and left a lasting impact on Evansdale, a community of just shy of 5,000 people. I think everyone's got a niece or a daughter or a cousin, and to them it's like, it just couldn't happen here, said Drew Collins, father of Elizabeth. So I think a lot of people are worried about something happening again. I think everyone has a lot invested in finding out who killed the girls. Evansdale Mayor Deanne Kobliska, who worked for the city at the time of the girls' disappearance, said, "The case brought the community together and made them more aware of our surroundings." Hey, Perry, thank you so much for being here. I hope your vacation was wonderful. So good to see you. You got that right, Digital. They are the best mods in the business. Couldn't ask for better moderators on my channel. Everybody came together. We all met at the Community Response Center, and we had hundreds of people volunteer to help search for our girls. We had our volunteer fire department oversee all that and send groups out. People came from all over to help. Local law enforcement and the Iowa Division of Criminal Investigation continue to receive tips and investigate this case as of today. And according to Scott Rieger, who is a special agent with the Iowa Division of Criminal Investigation, the department has received 117 tips in the past 10 months alone at their email address. It's kind of the natural trajectory of cases as they become more long-term, Rieger said. Hey, Pam. Thank you so much for joining Behind the Crime Door. Welcome, welcome. We so appreciate it. Information isn't coming in at the speed at which it did early on, but the information is still coming in, which makes them hopeful. Rieger has assisted on this case since it began in 2012 and became the lead Iowa DCI agent on the case after his predecessor left for another law enforcement job in 2017. While he trained for child abduction cases, Rieger said this was the first such case he ever worked. Child abduction homicides are some of the hardest cases to work because they are high profile. We as a society want to protect our children. Beyond that, particularly living in the community, being that some of the agents are from this area, you feel the weight of wanting to find and resolve, not just for yourself, but for the community at large, as well as the family. Jason Ellison is a detective with the Bremer County Sheriff's Office, and he joined the investigation in 2017. And he said the investigators are constantly evaluating what resources they could apply to assist the case. DNA technology, along with forensic genealogy and electronic forensics, have come a long way in the last 3 years or so. So it's an exciting time in law enforcement for agencies that have cases similar to this one, where it's kind of that endurance investigation, and we're waiting for some technology or new information that will help us push this case forward. Collins, whose daughter Elizabeth would have turned 18 years old this year, holds on to hope that technology will eventually lead to an arrest in this case. I thought when they found the bodies that we'd have quick answers, Collins said. But that being said, I do think time is definitely on our side. Technology is going to be on our side. Since 2012, the leaps in DNA technology are huge. So hopefully something comes up and they'll be able to use something that was left at that crime scene to match it with somebody else. See, one of the things that happened in Elizabeth and Lyric's case that did not happen in Delphi is that the girls were not found for 5 months. They were left out in the open, in the elements, both the summer and the fall. And by the time they found them, they were pretty much skeletonized. So there was not, I'm sure, a lot of evidence left on the bodies themselves. However, we will talk about that in a minute, because Jerry Holman speaks about that when asked about whether or not he believes that Evansdale and Delphi are connected. And I have that interview, so just give me a minute. We'll go over that. Hey, Jennifer, thank you so much for your super sticker, my dear. So appreciated. Thank you, thank you. I do too, Unsolved. I hope so. These little girls and their families deserve justice so much. Elliott declined to say whether there are currently any suspects in the case, adding that it's inappropriate for an investigative team to comment on certain suspects or people of interest. Where have we heard that before? But that's where the frustration comes, right? That's where the frustration comes as we, Joe Public. We're like, we want to know what they know. We want to know who you're looking at or who you suspect. We want to know those things. And one of the things that's interesting is that when what was I trying to say? My brain just kind of went, woo. Um, where people are talking about how it's inappropriate for investigators to talk about ongoing cases. We have that same frustration in Delphi because they won't talk about it. And there's always a reason. There's a really good reason. And we just need to keep that in mind. Hey, Michelle, thank you so much for your super sticker. So appreciated. Thank you for your support of the channel. Rieger encourages that anyone with information in this case to send a detailed email to our missing Iowa girls at dp.state.ia.us. It is still an active investigation. This case is not sitting on a shelf somewhere gathering dust. It's not in a box with a lid on it on some shelf. We have countless examples across our country of cases that everybody thought they were never going to figure out what happened. And time just has a way of fleshing a lot of these cases out. So that's how we're going to continue to approach this one. Collins still follows the investigation, relaying tips that people send him to local law enforcement and the Iowa Division of Criminal Investigation. I get some people who have given me their ideas of what maybe happened. So I look into certain people, Collins said. I mean, there's only so much investigating I can do, but I do keep my ears out. But it's not really good for the investigation for people to give me tips. They should go to the police directly. Over the past decade, Drew Collins has led efforts to honor the memory of his daughter and niece. The cousins became the inspiration for Angels Park, a memorial park in Evansdale, and it was dedicated in 2018 to honor those who lost their lives too early. She was a very sweet, happy, loving child, Collins said of Elizabeth. She loved her brother. She loved her sister. She was very good to her family, and she was always smiling. She was a good person, and she didn't deserve what happened to her. An annual Child Safety Day was established in Evansdale, as well as an annual motorcycle ride in the girls' memory. Child Safety Day raises awareness of children's safety issues, including bike helmets, properly installing a car seat, and stranger danger education, as well as DNA kits. The other thing is we have police there, and it gives the kids a chance to be around the police and know that the police are on their side. So it's just a well-rounded get-together for the kids. Despite the tragedy that took place in Evansdale 10 years ago, Collins remains active in the community, raising awareness of his daughter's story and pushing forward for other families of homicide victims. We've had so much support from people. I'm really comfortable here, Drew said. Even though the worst thing ever happened here, I love this place. I love Evansdale. I've lived all over the country and I'm not leaving. This is my home. The community will hold the 10th annual Memorial Ride and Drive event honoring the girls at 8 a.m. on July 16th. The money raised from the event is donated to Cedar Valley Crime Stoppers. You can pre-register and buy raffle tickets if you visit the Elizabeth Collins Foundation's website. It's just sad. I hate that we're still talking about Evansdale 10 years later, but we are. And it's the realization. And I know 5 years ago, I remember, on social media, people were talking about whether or not Evansdale would get solved before Delphi was solved. And would we be in Evansdale's shoes 10 years later? Well, we're heading into the sixth. We're coming down to where we're going to be celebrating 6 years for Delphi if something doesn't happen this year. So that's all that we can really say to that. One of the things that Heather Collins says is that time has not helped her pain of losing the two little girls. 10 years later, she does not feel time has helped at all. She said it's a nightmare to her every morning. I still have another day without one of my children. A piece of us is missing. A piece of our family is gone. Heather said in an interview last month, and we don't know who did it. We just don't. The only thing we know is she's in heaven with Lyric, and they're having the time of their lives. And we're down here just trying to get by each day. Heather described her daughter as an energetic little girl who loved people, animals, and swimming. She loved the water. She was a water baby. She loved swimming, and any chance we could go swimming, we did. She loved people. She loved animals. If she could have had every animal out there, she would have. Any animals she saw, she fell in love with, and they loved her. She loved nature. She loved being outside and outdoors. The younger Elizabeth and her older cousin were close, spending hours together at the Collins residence in Evansdale. Heather said they acted just like sisters. They fought like sisters over a toy or whatever it was. Heather said even though it has been 10 years since the last time she saw her daughter, she remembers the last moments that they spent together on the morning that Elizabeth disappeared. Elizabeth climbed into her parents' bed and talked about her upcoming birthday on July 31st. Elizabeth came in my bed and we talked that day, Heather shared. She was going to have like a Hawaiian typed theme, water with it, of course, with hula skirts and everything. So we just needed to get the invitations. After I got done doing some errands, we were going to do that. Heather left the family home that morning to run errands in the Cedar Valley. And Heather's mom, Wilma, was watching Lyric at the time and brought her to the Collins residence to help watch Elizabeth as well. The girls left their home and were last spotted riding their bicycles in Evansdale between noon and 1 o'clock that afternoon. I just remember, coming home and they weren't there. Heather said, I went to go look for her or for them. And they were, I figured, well, let's check the school. Let's check the school park. Check this place. Nowhere were they to be. Heather said after family members searched surrounding neighborhoods and parks with no signs of the girls, she decided to contact the police. And at 2:48 p.m., the girls were reported missing. Law enforcement began a search that eventually grew to include neighboring agencies and first responders. Heather's then husband, Drew, rode with the Evansdale Police Chief Kent Smock to search for the cousins. And at approximately 4 p.m. in the afternoon, the girls' bikes and other belongings were found along a trail at nearby Myers Lake. Heather received a text from Drew. He sent me a picture and said, "Is this Elizabeth?" It was a Hannah Montana purse that had been thrown up over a fence. I was like, yeah, she's gone. They're gone. That evening, volunteers joined law enforcement in their search for Elizabeth and Lyric. I just remember that night, that first night, sitting on our porch and just waiting by the phone. Please, Lord, let them come home. And they didn't. It's just a nightmare. And to me, it's still just a nightmare. As the Iowa Department of Criminal Investigation and Federal Bureau of Investigation joined the search, agents first focused on the family for any clues. They question you like nonstop. What were you doing at this time? What were you doing there? I see that you made a call at this time. Who was it to? What did you talk about? Investigators collected the phones and the personal computers of all family members. They turned their attention to neighbors, friends, and associates of the family. During the initial investigation, Heather's sister Lyric's mom, Misty Cook, and her then husband, Dan Morrissey, stopped cooperating with authorities, saying Dan felt targeted given his criminal history. Heather said her brother-in-law and sister's lack of cooperation was very, very frustrating. It was really hard because my sister, she was missing, MIA the whole time, Heather said. So this just made it harder because I just wanted my sister to be, there with me. I'm going through this. We're both going through this huge, devastating time, and she wasn't there. For nearly 5 months, Heather and Drew joined volunteers searching for any information that would lead to the safe return of Lyric and Elizabeth. I just remember our last vigil. We had got around to Iowa City and stuff, handing out flyers of the girls. And we got back to the church here in town. And I remember just being tired. And I couldn't believe how tired I was. And I was just like, Lord, I'm just done. Please help us. This is just so tiring. Every day trying to find her and her cousin. It was so exhausting. So I remember being so tired that day. I don't think I've ever been that tired in my life. Just a few weeks before Christmas in 2012, the family received crushing news. December 5th came and their bodies were found, another beyond devastating day, to have to tell all their siblings that their sister and niece were no longer going to be coming home. They were up in heaven with Jesus. That was a nightmare in itself, Heather remembered. You never dream of having to do that, ever. Anyone has had to do that, to tell your kids? I don't even know how I did it. How Drew and I did that. It was through the grace of God, I'll tell you that, because I just don't know. It's gut-wrenching. After Elizabeth's murder, Heather and Drew Collins divorced. Heather said the loss of their daughter destroyed their relationship. She said her relationship with her sister, Misty, has been plagued by suspicion and unanswered questions in the years since their daughters were killed. I met with her for the first time in years last week. We were out at the grave. I spoke with her. That was the first time in probably 4 years. I would go in like spurts to try to talk to her and that kind of stuff. I don't want to be around chaos, Heather said in a June interview. I've never done drugs. I can't be a part of that. I can't be in that lifestyle. That's not me. So then I would have to step back. And then I would see her doing really well. So I would step back in. But it never lasted very long. So back out this last time, I was just done. Heather fears that Misty and Dan's involvement with drugs may have played a role in this case. I just hope and pray all the time that her and her husband Dan, they are divorced now, that her and Dan didn't have anything to do with this, Heather said. I'm already devastated as it is, and I don't know how much more devastating it would be to know that they were involved in any way or because of their drug use or because of their drug abuse that they were involved with. Heather said she and Drew decided to have Elizabeth's body buried and questions the motivation behind Misty's decision to have Lyric cremated. They can still do tests on Elizabeth. They can't on Lyric. Her body is cremated. I tried talking to Misty about that, begging her not to have that, and she didn't listen. When she did something like that, it is like, to me, what are you hiding? What are you hiding? Science keeps growing. You see it all the time in cases. What are you hiding? You want her body cremated? It gives me more suspicion. Why did you have her body cremated? It's still to this day baffling to me. After a decade of searching for answers, Heather holds out hope that someone will ultimately be brought to justice for killing Elizabeth and Lyric. Science changes all the time, so I just pray that they find them soon. That's my prayer every day, Heather said. While she isn't confident those responsible for the murders are still in the Cedar Valley, she does continue to fear that her other children could very well be at risk, and she wonders, are they going to be out for them too? Among Heather's unanswered questions, why would anyone want to kill the two girls? What gave you the right to take my daughter and my niece? What gave you that right? And how do you think that was okay to take someone's child and kill them? They wrecked more lives than they would ever know, and they didn't just wreck our family's lives. The community is also different because of it. If you have any information in this case, you are please asked to call 1-855-355-TIPS or email our missing Iowa girls at dps.state.ia.us. Wow. That was pretty powerful statement there from Heather Collins. It gives us a little bit of an insight into what is going through her mind on the 10th anniversary of her daughter's murder and disappearance and ultimate murder. So I wanted to go over with you, hang on a second, a couple of things here. Jerry Holman was interviewed in August of 2017 regarding the Evansdale connection, if there was an Evansdale connection with the Delphi homicides of Abigail Williams and Liberty German. And this is what he said. Speaking about the killer, he could be, just again, this is kind of our theory, our speculation. We have no evidence that he's done it again. But we do check with other states to see if they have anything close to our case. And obviously, the case in Iowa is probably the closest. But we don't even know the cause of death in that case. They didn't find the victims until later. So it's hard to compare, but it is similar. So we can take that into consideration as well. And we've investigated that we've been in contact with Iowa, and Iowa has been in contact with us. And we've discussed the two cases, but nothing else seems to be there, and nothing seems to be popping up around it. It is similar, but that doesn't mean he's going to kill everybody the same way every time either. Law enforcement has not ruled out the possible connection between Evansdale and Delphi because they don't have the data to rule it in or out, or that possible link. We need to keep that in mind as we're talking about these two cases. Law enforcement came out early and said that Evansdale wasn't connected to Delphi, but they also came out early and told us that there was no catfishing or social media angle involved in the killings in Delphi either. So we have to remember that. And you know, there's something else that I wanted to talk about. The fact that there could very well be hold on a second. Oops. I pulled the wrong one. Just give me a minute. So, given the question on whether or not Evansdale and Delphi are connected or could be connected, or if there's a link between the two cases, I believe it's possible. There is something called atypical abductions or murder as stereotypical. The United States Department of Justice defines one type of abduction as stereotypical, and I think it's important. Its importance is relative for our discussion we're having here tonight. The Department of Justice defines an abduction as stereotypical as those in which the victim is under 18 years of age, the abductor is a stranger, and the abduction involves moving the victim at least 20 feet. In addition, one or more of the following is true of the victim: held for ransom, transported at least 50 miles and detained overnight, held with an intent to keep permanently, or murdered. Between October of 2010 and September of 2011, this is the latest available data that the FBI has released for public review, there were 105 victims of these stereotypical cases. The data follows 2 years old or younger, 14%, 3 to 5 years of age, 10%, 6 to 11 years of age, 18%, and 12 to 17 years old, 58%. Single abductions versus double abductions, 81% were one victim. Only 18% were two victims. More than two victims, 1%. The rarity of two or more victims, as statistically noted, is already among a rare set of statistics: the murder of a child by a stranger. While doing researching actual cases of double child abduction that ended or intended to end in murder, we found an important common denominator in a handful of cases. The following sample is much too small to draw an absolute conclusion or profile on the motives of one who abducts more than one child, but in my opinion, it serves at least an anecdotal evidence for one to reasonably assume the motive behind the murders of Abby and Libby. Cases of double child abductions are extremely rare, and they're not unprecedented by any sense, but they're rare. And the risk of being caught during the actual kidnapping and the difficulty in controlling two children may be the main reasons why there are so few multiple abductions. Doing a review of People magazine investigates the Delphi murders, it is stated that that authorities from Idaho and Indiana met, compared notes, and launched an investigation as to whether the two were connected. Not Idaho, Iowa. Sorry. It was reported that after an exhaustive investigation, that the conclusion was that Delphi and Evansdale murders are in no way related. I think it needs more investigation. The people have talked about the dates of the two murders. Abby and Libby was February 13th, 2017. So 2/13/17. And then Elizabeth and Lyric was 7/13 of 12. So they're the same dates backwards. I've also heard that if you add the three numbers, 7, 13, and 12, I believe you get 34 in both cases. So people who are into numerology or numbers or things like that, or killers who are fascinated by that kind of coincidence, whatever, that would be something that they might do, you know? I don't know. I just feel like they need to look at them harder, or look at it harder. You've got a slaughterhouse not far from Evansdale. You have a slaughterhouse extremely near to Delphi because it butts right up to the trails and the Monon High Bridge. Those things are all things that need to be looked at. And I'm sure law enforcement has. I'm sure that they're not sitting back, not looking at those things. A number of people have looked at those things and talked about them. So, but there's always going to be differences, and there's always going to be things that are compared that look similar. We talked about that in my last live about the similarities between Delphi and Evansdale. But I've often wondered, if this killer is into numerology, then it could very well be that he is the same killer, and he's going through a period of he kills and then he rests, and that suffices him, and then 5 years later he kills again. People have surmised that if that's the case, that he would kill again this year. But I do think that there's a lot of things that are not similar in the case. And since we don't know how Elizabeth and Lyric were murdered, simply because their bodies were found too late to determine that, it could mean that they were strangled. Or something. Obviously, a lot of times when, and I'm sure Michelle could speak to this, but the hyaloid bone is usually broken or damaged in a strangulation, isn't it, Michelle? Doesn't that happen most often? So, I mean, the fact that they can't determine how the girls were killed, it could very well be that there was no physical damage to bones or anything that led them to be able to say that, that it was blunt force trauma, or they were stabbed because there were marks on the bones, things like that. But I mean, rumors are rumors, and they're going to play out everywhere on social media. People are going to talk about these two cases because they are so close in proximity to one another. There's a lot of similarities. being outside, left outside in the open, to be found. I think that that says a lot about the killer. Um, but yeah, I just think they need to examine them again. Tamara says she believes the crime in Delphi could have been an attempted kidnapping and the cemetery is significant. Yeah, for sure. I said the other night when we were talking about Delphi, the cemetery is significant. Um, when you stop and think that if you're at that cemetery, you walk to the back left corner of the cemetery, you walk right through a gate and go on to Ron Logan's property and immediately turn right and walk right down over the hill to the crime scene. And very possible, Michelle, in both cases, they were being stalked too. And that is scary, but very, very highly possible. And, you know, if you've got a person who's working at the slaughterhouses, and they travel from one to another for whatever reason, you know, that makes the crimes easier to commit because they're moving. And somebody earlier today, I was reading a Reddit sub post where somebody was talking about, wouldn't it be interesting if Bridge Guy turned out to be a similar type of traveling killer as Israel Keys? I don't know that I feel that way about Bridge Guy at the moment, but I mean, it's definitely something to think about if you're looking at whether or not these murders are related. But Evansdale, you know, it's been 10 years. They're still saying that it's an open case, and I just think that it's really hard, really, really hard to think about. And I know that there's a lot of people out there that think that Lyric's parents were involved in this because of the meth and the drug abuse and the drug sales that were going on. You know, it's surely something I know that law enforcement has had to look at. They had to have looked at that angle. I'm so sure. So there was a post that was made about a cashier where who supposedly gave the girls directions on how to get to Myers Lake that day. And supposedly the cashier was questioned twice. And the older girl had possibly gone to the lake prior with an older cousin the previous week and likely knew how to get there if this were the case, or possibly a nearby park as they were home late. Dogs searched an area of woods east of the lake and trail. I'm guessing Elk Run Heights Park area. On an off chance, is it possible the girls ended up at the park riding? This guy shows up looking for girls and finds them at the park and then walks with them or leads them to the lake. Maybe he gave them directions to the park instead knowing he could use a ruse later to direct them to the lake. So these are all things that have been on Reddit about what may or may not have happened to them that day. But it's very possible that someone was stalking them in the same way that Abby and Libby were being stalked online. Maybe somebody saw them in the park that day and were actually out there looking for an opportunity And maybe the guy had a car and maybe he said that he would lead them to the lake. Follow my car, I'll take you there. And then he goes to the Arbutus Drive area, abducts them, and his story lines up with where he told police he told them to go in the first place. I mean, those are some of the theories that are out there. And it's just like Michelle said, there's so many possibilities. And in researching all of this and all of these cases, the common denominator that I find when I do this is that these cases are so multifaceted and the layers are unbelievable and they're very difficult to manage, to even figure out what's going on. I don't have a video of this conversation digital. The post I found was from 2 years ago, and the person who posted it has since left Reddit. So I don't know that there's a conversation with this cashier or not. I have no idea, but it would be interesting to know if they did talk to somebody that gave them directions, or if the girls already knew how to get there. I mean, those are all possibilities. And just Pam's right. I mean, if these cases are connected, then sadly we're going to be probably hearing about another double homicide too, simply because of the 5-year thing. They didn't say, Tamara. I think it said a cashier, and then they said he was questioned twice by law enforcement. So I think it was a male cashier. So, but that's what I have for us tonight on Evansdale. And do you guys have any comments or anything on what you heard tonight or what I talked about tonight? I mean, it's just really hard for me when you have the age groups. I mean, if you're looking at two crimes that may have sexual motivation, you have pedophile and you have hebephile, because the age differences in Abby and Libby versus Elizabeth and Lyric, you cannot deny. So that kind of bothers me. But if it's a serial killer type of a situation, then that wouldn't be an issue. So, I mean, we have multiple different things to, to look at and wonder about. One of the things that I find interesting is that they're still getting tips. I would like to know what those tips are that they're still getting in. Sally says that the time of death has never been revealed. Only law enforcement and possibly family know. July 13th is the anniversary of when they were abducted. Exactly. We don't know when they were killed, but they disappeared on July 13th. So I don't know that they'll ever know when the girls were actually murdered, because with the condition that the body was in, unless they get a confession and the person tells them, they may not know. But I will just tell you that there's a lot of things with Elizabeth and Lyric that they don't know because of the condition that the bodies were in. And that's going to make the case much more difficult to solve. But it sounds to me like there were things that were left at that crime scene that may have DNA on them. So that is a good thing. Hey, Cold Truth, I missed you. I didn't see you come in. Welcome, welcome. Hey, Digital. I was thinking they had been riding in a car before, but never on bikes. Maybe different entry points coming from different directions. No, they had their bikes. And their bikes were found at the at the at the lake, on a trail around the side of the lake. And Elizabeth's purse had been thrown up over a fence and was hanging on a fence. And I do believe that, Michelle. I agree with you. I believe they were killed the same day they were taken, because most often these types of crimes, if their intent is to kill, they do it quickly, within 24 to 48 hours. That's why the FBI always tells us that those first couple of days and those first hours are so important. So, but they could, like I said, I think they've got DNA off the clothing of the girls that was found by them. And only time will tell. DNA technology is getting better and better and more intricate every day. They're able to do more with less. So we can only hope that that's what's happening. And when that does happen, that it will also be a huge revelation, possibly in Delphi, if we're still waiting to get a resolution there. But guys, it was really great being with you tonight. I think I'm going to say goodnight, and thank you all. Unless somebody has more questions or anything else that you want to know or you want to say. Yeah, they were found. You're very right, Maria. They were found. With the limited information, it's hard but different abduction site from where they were found matches an organized offender. It does. They were abducted from Myers Lake and found 25 miles away in a nature reserve, wildlife reserve. And they were out in the open. They were just left almost as if he was taunting law enforcement. I definitely believe he's an organized killer. And I do believe that he was taunting law enforcement. I'm not afraid. He didn't even try to hide the bodies. He didn't try to bury them or cover them to where they would not be found. They were just out in the open. And the same is with Abby and Libby. Even though they were in the woods, they were left laying right out in the open. I do believe that Libby had, if we can believe some of the things that have been said, there was an attempt to cover the upper portion of her with sticks and leaves. Sometimes covering a victim can be signs of remorse. So that to me leads me to believe that it might not be the same killer. So those are all things that we have to kind of, think about. But I hope you guys have a great rest of your week. I will be back on Thursday night. Probably going to be talking about Delphi, and I'm going to do 2 missing cases on Thursday, since I didn't get a missing case done tonight. That's really important to me, that we continue that trek and that we highlight missing people. I do want to say that one of the things that I'm going to be looking at that I've just ran across, and I hope you guys might find this kind of or sort of interesting, because to me it's something that's I don't want to say near and dear to my heart, but it's extremely important to me. Hold on one second. Trying to get my StreamYard to work. I was doing some investigating on YouTube, looking for some videos on Evansdale today, and I ran across something from back in April that's going on in Indiana, and it's the investigation into Native American boarding schools in Indiana. Native American children lost their lives at 2 boarding schools in Indiana between 1883 and 1895 as the U.S. Department of the Interior makes plans to release the result of their investigation into these institutions. The Indiana Department of Natural Resources is taking a closer look at how many more children remain unaccounted for in grave sites across the state. This was very troubling to me. It's something that is something that just bothers me greatly, I guess I should say. The fact that this is not talked about, the fact that this isn't in mainstream media, when we have the missing Indigenous women in our country that are still going missing every single day off the reservations, and nobody gives a damn. It's just like, who cares? These are marginalized people, and I am tired of that. So I am going to be covering this particular case in Indiana because it's just something that I was not aware of and was just brought aware of today, and I want to find out what's going on. As I don't know if you guys know, but up in Canada they had something similar with Indian children, and it was just gut-wrenching what they found. It's just, I don't know, it's just terrible. Yeah, Pam, we were, and it's just not right. Our government and what our government has done to Native Americans, period, is not right. So I'm not happy with this story that I've heard, and it makes me sad because it makes me wonder what they did to try to cover it all up and how much of it will really become known. But that's one of the things I'll be working on for later, that I will be covering as well. And again, if you guys have anything that you want me to cover, please send it to me in email. You can find my email on my website, or excuse me, on my channel's about page, or I will drop it for you right here. And you guys can always email me. It is CLH. It's so very sad. Just an update on the Flora investigation. I probably will be talking greatly about Flora on Thursday night. And one of the things, I've not heard back from the Indianapolis Colts yet. I did reach out to them to see if they would give a matching reward to the Flora Fire reward fund as they did for Delphi. And I still have not heard back. So I will be reaching out again if I don't hear something soon. But I wanted to let you guys know that. But anyway, thank you guys so much for all your donations, all of your subscriptions, and all of your memberships. I appreciate so much everything that you guys do for my channel, all my moderators, and all of my subscribers. And it's always great being here with you. And I look forward to next time. I hope you guys all have a great evening and a great rest of your week. Be safe out there, everyone.